Hello and welcome to the instructional video for Synthesizer, my 7-day roguelike challenge game for 2015. I'm going to talk a little bit about the interface of the game first. In the top half of the screen we can see the Synthesizer controls. There are two sections, each composed of an oscillator and a filter. The left controls, oscillator and filter 1, are used by the player, and the right controls, oscillator and filter 2, are used by the enemies, called glitches in this game. In this game we have a slightly unusual concept of time. Turns have become micro-turns, called beats. I'll explain more about beats a little later in the video, but I just wanted to introduce the concept so I can mention it when it crops up on the way there. Okay, if we look at the top left of the player section of the synth in Oscillator 1, we can see a 9x9 LCD display. This is where the current waveform is drawn. The waveform is a fundamental part of the game. If we look down the side here, we can see a scale. The red numbers are negative and the black numbers are positive. Going across the display from left to right, we're representing time. The leftmost column represents the value of the wave for the current beat or moment in time. When we as a player choose to attack a glitch or mob in the game, if the value of the wave is positive, then the glitch will receive that much in damage, so from 0 to 4. And by saying 0 is positive there, I'm not intentionally trying to annoy mathematicians. If the value of the wave, however, is negative at the point when we attack, then we, the player, will receive that much damage instead. The same applies for mobs, except they use the wave on the other side of the display in the Oscillator 2 section. Now, the waveform can be altered by all these controls here. You can't directly manipulate the controls as if this were a VST. The settings are changed when either the player or the glitches pick up patches on the map. The glitches picking up a patch will cause the patch to affect Oscillator 2, while the player picking up that same patch will have an effect on Oscillator 1. So let's talk about the settings. Here we have the waveform selector knob. This allows you to select the type of the waveform. There's the triangle wave, the sawtooth wave, the pulse wave, and finally the noise wave. Next we have the amplitude control. This controls the height of the wave. The higher the setting, the higher the wave will reach at its height, but also the lower it will go at its lowest point. Thus there is the potential for both more damage on mobs, but also more damage to the player. It's worth noting that the amplitude control also affects the period of some of the waves, namely the triangle and the sawtooth wave. The period is the width of each repeating portion of the wave. The higher we set the amplitude, the wider the wave will also become, which will mean different strategies have to be evolved in order to survive in the game. The period of the pulse wave, however, is actually set separately via this pulse width control. A pulse wave is characterized by a steady stream of points at the highest point of the wave, followed by a stream of points at the lowest point of the wave. The number of points is controlled by the pulse width. Now let's talk about the filter section. The filter affects the waveform by taking away some of its energy. There are two types of filter in this synthesizer, a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter. This filter type selection control can select either of the two types of filter, or can be set to off, which means no filter will be used. The high-pass filter removes low values, allowing the high values to pass unhindered. Correspondingly, the low-pass filter removes the high frequencies, allowing the low frequencies to pass. How aggressively the filter takes away energy from the wave is controlled by the cutoff selector switch. A value of 4 on the cutoff selector switch means there is no effect. Everything will be allowed to pass. A value of 0, on the other hand, means that nothing is allowed to pass. If the cutout is set to 0 and high-pass filter is selected, there will be no negative values at all, and the player or glitch, depending on whether we are talking about Oscillator 1 or 2, will be unable to self-harm. If the cutout is set to 0 and low-pass filter is selected, there will be no positive values, and it will be impossible to damage mobs. If the cutout selector is set to a value between the two extremes, it will filter out all positive or all negative values that are higher than that number. Therefore, if set to 3, all values of 4 will be removed. If set to 2, all values of 3 or 4 will be removed, and if set to 1, all values above 1 will be removed, either for negative or positive depending on the type of the filter. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of the synthesizer settings. Now that we have covered those, let's move on to the rest of the interface. Down here on the left we have the game area, an 8x8 non-scrolling grid. Here we see the player, represented by an @ symbol. These two characters are glitches, the enemies of the game. There are 6 types of glitches, who all have different statistics and behave very differently. They all have a certain amount of hit points though, which can be seen when we hover over them with the mouse. Walls, seen here, are indestructible and serve to block your progress as you move around the map. These blue items are patches. They affect the synthesizer in the various ways we talked about earlier. Finally, we have effects. These coloured squares on the floor can change the way both you and the glitches attack. Again, you can hover over them with the mouse for more information. There are 5 different types in all. For your attack to be affected by an effect, you have to be standing on top of it when you make your attack. The same is true for the mobs too, who can make equal use of the effects. The effects, it's worth mentioning, do move about quite a bit as you play the game. You can tell which direction they're heading in with these little arrows here, which is a handy feature. The master volume is a 3-element 7-segment display that tracks the master volume, which is equivalent to player hit points in other games. The pattern display shows which pattern you're on, which can be thought of as a level. This display shows how many beats have passed since you started the pattern, which leads us nicely into our discussion of the sequencer. If you've used step sequencers on musical equipment, then you will find this very familiar. What we have here is a grid. It's 25 rows going down and 16 columns across. The rows going down represent at the top the player, then up to 4 effects which can be in play at the same time, and then we have up to 20 glitches. Going across we have time. Again, as with the wave display, the extreme left represents right now, the current beat, with time increasing as we go across to the right. Now we said earlier that unlike other games, we have beats in this game, which compared to turns are somewhat shorter. If you look across the sequencer here on the player line, you will see that we have beat, nothing, 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 beat, nothing, 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 and so on. Every filled square is a beat that you act in. The unfilled beats you will not be able to act in, and they will flash past very quickly. If you look down, you'll be able to see just when effects will act, which is when they move, and when glitches will act. Now, the advantage you have compared to the glitches is that you can time your attacks to take best effect of both the effects on the board and the current state of your waveform. How do you do that, you might ask? Well, by using the skip turn key. The skip turn key is bound by default to the 5 on the numeric keypad, and when you press it, it's a bit like using the wait command in other roguelikes, except a bit different because, as we mentioned, we're using beats here, not turns. Now, what happens when you elect to skip a beat is this. All your subsequent beats and rests are shifted 1 beat to the right. So let's say you're about to act. Your line on the sequencer looks like this: beat, wait, 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 beat, wait, wait. Now if we press skip, you'll see we have only advanced 1 beat. We haven't skipped to the next time we would have acted. And that's very important because, as I hinted at earlier, it allows you to time your attack strategically to make the most of the situation. I'll hit skip again, and notice the waveforms will advance by 1 beat, and the lines on the step sequencer will all advance by 1 beat too. This is very important and key to how you play the game. Now, the glitches on the other hand are not very bright, and they don't think strategically. So when it's their turn, they will do their thing. And if that means attacking you, even if it would hurt themselves, well, they'll just go ahead and do it. So again, you can think how that can be used strategically if you have your eye on the beats. The mobs all have set numbers of rests between beats. The player, of course, as we've seen earlier, acts once every 4 beats. Some mobs are the same, but others act once every 2 turns, or have a period much longer than the player. When mobs spawn though, they will be at a random point in their beat cycle, so if you have 2 mobs the same, they aren't necessarily going to be acting always on the same beat together. Incidentally, you may have noticed earlier when we highlighted a mob, it shows you which line on the sequencer represents the mob, which is handy. And that works for effects too. There's some more information available here too. The hit point values for all mobs are shown, while, for effects, a small indicator shows what kind of effect is in play. Finally, we need to mention the event log over here, which often has important information for the player. And last but not least, we have Moop. Moop, we are reliably informed, is bare. Thank you for watching this instructional video. We wish you a pleasant death and a trouble-free connection to your next life.